If I were an element in the periodic table, I would be in the reactive section. My natural inclination is to pop off, to react, typically immediately. And I've had to learn to respond rather than react. For humans, the solution is therapy. For socio-technical systems, the solution is practice and perhaps a slightly different approach. I love that this conference is focused on incident response and not incident management. Incident management feels like a situation you come across, you handle, and then never come back to. It's just finished. Our emergency management services tackle fires and hurricanes and tornadoes, all kinds of natural disasters that threaten our homes and impact our lives. And we take a lot of inspiration from those patterns of management because they work. They're well thought out. The execution is proven. But that's not the entire story, is it? A software incident isn't a fire or a hurricane. Now, it can certainly feel like that. It certainly gives you that adrenaline rush in the moment. When we're talking about this topic, I like the word response over management because for me, it better reflects the repetitive nature of incidents. We're always going to have incidents of all kinds. We're going to have a lot of them forever. For me, it's not about trying to eliminate incidents. It's about making them smaller, more expected tasks, even standard parts of your workday, as radical as that might sound. That requires a unique approach to architecture, development, and operations. I'm Emily Freeman. I'm the author of DevOps for Dummies and the co-curator of 97 Things Every Cloud Engineer Should Know. I am passionate about all things DevOps and developer communities. At the end, we'll have a few minutes for questions. So as we're going through, think about what you might want to ask, and I encourage you to participate. I love questions and even occasionally comments. I want to take a moment to step back from the topic at hand and discuss how we communicate as an industry. And really, if I'm honest, to blame Twitter for just about everything, because why not throw them under the bus? Twitter has been useful in a lot of ways. Don't get me wrong. We have access to each other in a way we just didn't before. We are connected, and that is a good thing. I know many of you because of Twitter. I love that. But I think the character limit, the algorithms, and probably our reduced attention spans has damaged our tolerance of nuance. And this isn't just a Twitter problem. I just like to pick on Twitter. This is a much more global issue. There's another layer to this, something bigger, yet almost invisible. In social media, there's something called context collapse. The term was coined by Dana Boyd, and the concept originates with the work of Irving Goffman and Joshua Meyrowitz. You know I love a social scientist. I talk about them all the time. Context collapse, in a sentence, is the flattening of multiple audiences into a single context. You and your close friends have a lot of shared context formed over time throughout your friendships and relationships. You and your work colleagues have a shared context of your workplace, the unique institutional customs and knowledge. Words are powerful. It's why I love them. They make change. We're seeing the power of words unify and inspire in real time with Volodymyr Zelensky's leadership in the midst of Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. But words are not enough. I am continuously frustrated by the limitation of my own rather verbose spoken language. We lack words that would convey deep meaning in specific contexts. They just don't exist yet, at least not in every language. I think it's these gaps that contribute to a lot of societal conflict and misunderstandings. But words are really our only medium with which to convey complex thoughts and ideas and feelings to other humans. As you move away from those in-groups of shared context, your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, whichever group you want to speak about, we begin to enter groups with which we have no reputation, no trust, and no mutual understanding. Which means the thing that was super funny and lighthearted in one context can be wildly misinterpreted by people you've never met or heard of. That is the gift of the retweet. Your words reach people that have none of the context that enveloped your original remark. Now, my point in saying this is that I think that a phenomenon that was once relegated to social media has bled into our other communities. It's impacting how we communicate with each other in every medium. I define community as places that people gather to share experiences, learn, even socialize. We have a lot of communities in tech, and there's a ton of overlap. You likely belong to many communities within the broader industry. Lately, I've noticed there's been this flattening of advice, dare I say thought leadership, that's been reduced to little quips, funny retorts. I think we're better than that. I think we are some of the smartest people on the planet, and we are capable of gathering together, thinking critically about a concept, even if we don't immediately agree. We're capable of sitting with that, working through nuance, ruminating on the good, the bad, the weird, the undefined. I think we're capable of having much more complex discussions than we are currently having. And I think that there's an over-indexing right now on how to implement the ideas of others rather than taking inspiration from those ideas and tailoring them to your own unique circumstances. You see this right now with DevOps. Somewhere along the line, we lost our focus on reducing silos and building bridges, and instead began to put more and more load onto individuals. One of the unintended consequences of DevOps has been this pressure or belief that everyone has to do everything, that a JavaScript developer has to understand the intricacies of an application CI/CD pipeline or the details of cloud infrastructure. And on the other side of that coin, there's been this extreme focus on developers lately. That's left groups like operations engineers feeling somewhat ignored, even unsure of their role. DevOps is not a methodology that encourages everyone to do everything or know everything. That is ridiculous. We all have specialties, and we should lean into our personal and professional strengths, relying on others to buttress our weaknesses. Before we had DevOps, we had something a little like this. There was no overlap or shared understanding, no place to understand each other, respect each other. Developers would write code with zero concern of security and testing, operations, none of that. They typed into their machines, and once that program compiled, it was someone else's problem. This caused a lot of frustrations. You know this story. The first name of DevOps was Agile Infrastructure. In other words, how do you bring Agile principles to infrastructure or operations? And I believe the intention of DevOps was to go from this to something like this, an overlap in communication and shared processes, an awareness of the complexities and concerns of your colleagues in different roles. This is collaboration and teamwork. This, for me, is happiness. But somehow we ended up here. And y'all, if I contributed to this, I'm sorry, because this is not the answer. It's like we overlaid the SDLC with developers and just said, ship it. The lack of nuance in messaging, the compression of ideas and thoughts and methodologies led us here. And this problem is deeply integrated with incident response. It's important that people have ownership and accountability over the services they build. But creating an organization following the interpretation of DevOps that says developers are responsible for the entire lifecycle of their code, it's just, well, I've very rarely seen it be successful. Not only because it eliminates or demoralizes specialty groups outside of development, but because you're asking developers at that point to be an expert in a stack of languages and tools, an expert in security and testing, an expert in deploying and releasing code, an expert in operations, infrastructure, an expert in identifying and fixing problems on the fly. I mean, maybe y'all are superhuman. I'm not. I'm absolutely not. I am overwhelmed just thinking about trying to be an expert in not only one area, but half a dozen. I order bagels by the half dozen, not areas of expertise. No one needs that. Now, I'm guessing I'm not alone in this. In fact, I'm guessing that some of you feel ill-equipped to both ship software that is resilient to failure and respond to incidents. I think developers and engineers of all kinds do their best work when they feel empowered and fulfilled and happy. I like to feel happy. I think to achieve this, we have to take a step forward and think about what's next. How do organizations not only apply DevOps in a way that increases velocity, but design their teams and socio-technical systems for resiliency? This requires us to look at the full software delivery process. Because incident response isn't just about getting better at responding to incidents. That will only take you so far. It's also about reducing the quantity, severity, and scope of incidents. I believe the first step in this is accepting that in modern software development, there is no beginning and end. We are in a constant state of motion. And part of that shift is eschewing the old way of thinking about our work. Last year, I pitched a radical new idea, a replacement for the SDLC. Now, if you're already familiar with this idea, you can take 4 minutes, go make yourself a cup of coffee. There are longer, more in-depth talks on the topic, but I want to quickly summarize so we're all on the same page. You are already familiar with the software development lifecycle, what we call the SDLC. I was shocked to find out that the SDLC has been in use since the 1960s. The SDLC is a boomer. And after all these years, it's remained more or less the same. There are always slight adjustments and variations. Certainly with the DevOps toolchain, we saw something extremely similar to this bent into an infinity loop. Beyond being linear and unreflective of our daily work, I think the biggest issue with the SDLC is it's become an assumption. We don't even think about it anymore. Don't believe me? When DevSecOps became the first derivative of DevOps, it sought to move security left. And this should show you the pervasiveness of the SDLC. That phrase meant to bring awareness and consideration of security early in the software development process at a time of planning and designing and architecting, assumed a reference to the construct. I think this limits us because the models we use and the way we discuss our work impacts our work. I think we need a model capable of capturing the multi-threaded, non-sequential nature of our work, as well as embody the roles engineers take on and the considerations they encounter along the way. What I settled on is something I call the revolution model. I believe this visualization is capable of capturing the pivotal moments of any software scenario. I call it revolution because, for one, it revolves, at least in theory. It's static there. Its circular shape reflects the continuous and iterative nature of our work, but also because it is revolutionary. I'm challenging a 60-year-old model that is embedded into our daily language. The revolution model is constructed of 5 concentric circles describing critical roles of software development: architecting, developing, automating, deploying, and operating. Intersecting each loop are 6 spokes that describe production considerations every engineer must consider throughout any engineering work: testability, securability, reliability, observability, flexibility. and scalability. The circles that create the base of the model are a shift in thinking about our roles as engineers. We've long used personas as the default way to divide audiences and group people. Personas bother me because they either oversimplify someone's career or needlessly complicate it. I think few people fit cleanly and completely into persona-based buckets like developers and operations anymore. I certainly don't. The lines have gotten pretty fuzzy. But perhaps most critically, I believe personas are immutable. A persona is wholly dependent on how someone identifies themselves. It's intrinsic, not extrinsic. Our titles and jobs change pretty regularly, actually, but we likely still think of ourselves as a specific persona: a programmer, a developer, database admin, IT pro, security engineer. I was a developer. I will always identify as a developer. My background influences not only how I see myself, but also how I approach my work. Roles are very different. Roles are temporary, inconsistent, constantly fluctuating. Your work isn't confined to a single set of skills. It may have been a decade ago, but not today. And beyond all of this is perhaps a more important concept. We aren't just devs or ops or QA anymore. We play all of these roles at various times. And no matter what role we play, we have to consider a number of issues. The first is testability. All software systems require testing to assure architects that designs work, developers that code works, so on and so forth. Testing in its many forms is what enables systems to be durable and have longevity. Now, security is everyone's responsibility, but I'd argue few understand how to design and execute secure systems. I struggle with this. I think security is something we know we should dedicate time to, but don't often make time for. Let's be honest, it's hard and it's complicated. There's a unique jargon and it's honestly scary because the stakes are really high. It's absolutely critical that applications and services work as expected most of the time. You're going to hear a lot about this today. That said, availability is often mistakenly treated as a synonym for reliability. It bothers me because it's a single aspect of the concept. If a system is available, but customer data is inaccurate or out of sync, the system is not reliable, and that is an incident. Reliability might be the end result, the score, but it's resiliency for me. That's the journey, the action engineers can take to improve reliability. Observability is the ability to have insight into the inner workings of a system. It's telemetry, monitoring, alerting. There's an aspect of observability that overlaps with reliability. That's why they're neighbors. But the purpose isn't just to maintain a reliable system. The concept originates in linear dynamic systems and is defined as how well the internal states of a system can be understood based on information about its external outputs. Observability is more about understanding than anything else. Flexible systems absorb new code smoothly, embody a clean separation of concerns, and are partitioned into small components or classes. Flexible systems are architected to enable the now and the next. In our work, the only thing constant is change. And in every role we play, creating flexible systems and solutions that will grow as applications scale is critical. Scalability in this case refers to more than a system's ability to scale for additional load, though that is important. It implies growth, a system's ability to grow over time. Scalability in this model carries the continuous innovation of a team, the byproducts of that growth within a system. And for me, it's the most human of the considerations. It requires each of us in our various roles to consider everyone around us. Our customers who use the system and expect its services to be reliable, our colleagues with whom we collaborate, and even our future selves. One of the reasons I'm passionate about this model is that it democratizes accountability. Accountability can have a massive impact on incident response. Now, I prefer the word accountable over responsible. Accountability is a willingness to account for one's actions. whereas responsibility is having control over a situation or a duty to deal with an issue. The best example I have of this is parenting. I have a 7-year-old firecracker of a daughter. She's the light of my life and absolutely amazing, very sassy. And as a mom, I'm responsible for keeping my child alive. I provide basic necessities. But the higher order role I have in her life is to love her, to model the principles I value, and to train her to be a self-sufficient, independent, functioning human. That's where I am accountable to her. I make decisions daily, and I never know if I'm choosing correctly. None of us do. But I do know the information I used to make the decision, how I came to the conclusion that I did. And when she's older, I'll be able to account for my decisions. Even in the cases where I'll have chosen incorrectly, I have confidence that I made the best choice given the data I had at the time. That's all we can ever do, at home and at work. The model many of us are currently working in puts all of the responsibility into a single role. I want to back out of that pretty quickly, if I'm honest, and embrace accountability. I believe Revolution can help redirect us from a developer-centric interpretation of DevOps to an implementation that enables flexibility, respect, and shared accountability. This model calls out specific specialties and areas of domain expertise. This is important because these areas will always be critical to our shared success. Not in a way that means a single role carries the weight of the entire system or even a sliver of the system. It rejects the notion that experts who do not identify as developers are second-class citizens. This is a culture where everyone stands on equal ground. Everyone has visibility into the work of others, and everyone is committed to the success of their peers. This creates a culture where teams can respond to incidents rather than react to downtime. Let's look at how this works in practice. Take something like testability. A developer, at a minimum, is responsible for unit tests to verify the behavior of the features they implement or the bugs they fix. I would argue they should be making more tests, but that's a different talk. Anyone working to automate processes and remove manual toil, regardless of their title, should be automating tests. These tests run every time code is compiled or committed to the main branch. Any continuous integration or deployment pipeline should have integration tests or end-to-end tests implemented within that pipeline. And these are just a few of the intersections of roles and considerations. You can actually measure this. The metric of test coverage is flawed, absolutely, but it is a way of noting the testability of a system, a service, or a class. Engineer opinions are data as well. I think we over-index sometimes on quantitative data because we're engineers, when qualitative data from experts can be just as valuable. And newsflash, you are the experts. This is just one example. You can utilize this model as a way of measuring a baseline and reevaluating progress at set intervals. You know the data you have available to you and where you have gaps. Utilize data when you can and fill in those gaps with qualitative data. Even an assumption is a better anchor than nothing when attempting to establish a baseline. Each of these areas impact incident response. This model normalizes work in a way that the SDLC never did because our work is never finished. I struggle with housework. I'm a bit of a slob. Don't tell my mom. Just kidding. She knows. One of the reasons that my home is always a bit messy or a lot messy is that I'm not diligent about regular tidying. It turns out the people who always have clean homes tidy constantly. They put things away every time. They do the dishes every night. They clean all the time, which is, good for them. But it's that diligence and that regular attention that creates a clean living space. Our work is pretty similar to this, I think. There's no finishing something and moving on. Things always come back. Everything we build must be maintained. Every piece of code must be updated or deprecated. But it's this regular attention that holds the key to better incident response. Because incident response isn't just about avoiding incidents, but making them part of our regular work. There are generally 5 levels of incident severity. If you want more details than I can give in the next few minutes, I highly recommend the incident response content published by PagerDuty. It's amazing. Sev 1 is the most grave type of incident. Functionality is severely impacted, and a large percentage of customers can't use the product. These incidents carry the risk of violating service level agreements or SLAs and typically require public statements to address the issue. Sev 2 is a severe product degradation that impacts a large number of customers. Sev 3 can escalate to Sev 2 pretty quickly, but if they're not responded to immediately. These incidents typically impact a smaller group of customers or involve a single service, not a grouping that makes up the product. Sev 4 incidents do not affect a customer's ability to use the product. Maybe the service is slow or it has performance issues. And Sev 5 incidents are really bugs. Customers notice something odd, but they can still utilize the product. Features function generally as expected. There is a distinct bifurcation between the first 2 severity categories and the latter 3. Sev 1 and Sev 2 incidents are major incidents. They require an immediate and large-scale response. The others are much easier to address. We're never going to eliminate incidents. You know this. There will always be issues and bugs and performance problems and outages. But we need to start treating incidents like normal work. And that requires fewer Sev 1 and Sev 2 incidents. In these major incidents, you have no choice but to react. Stress is high. This distracts from ongoing proactive work. It creates technical debt and it tires engineers. The more these severe incidents occur, the more people begin to feel like their job is a series of Sisyphean tasks. We want boring JIRA tickets that get moved up to the top of the priority list. We want calm. To accomplish that, it's less about your actual incident response processes and more about planned small improvements measured over time. The shared accountability model of Revolution acknowledges that there is no beginning or end in software development, not anymore. Incident response isn't a perfect line with a beginning and an end. It is a continuous, diligent work process. I believe this model, while not perfect, gets us closer to the next phase of DevOps. It captures the ever-changing complexity of socio-technical systems, and it emphasizes workflows and processes that make the right thing to do the easy thing to do. Throughout the day at this conference, you're going to hear from incredible speakers and technical leaders. I love some of these people. I want you to resist the urge to compress their advice into sound bites. I want you to really sit with the ideas we discuss, share your thoughts, debate, ask questions. Think about how an approach would work well for your team or wouldn't. What would you change? Incident response starts with shared accountability, and that goes beyond standard work. Accountability starts here, today, with this conference. Your voice is powerful. Your ideas are novel. Listen, learn, and perhaps most importantly, share. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have questions. I'm excited to chat.